A Florida State University program in interdisciplinary computing production.
Home is where the heart is. All right, we're talking about web forms for a little while here. And this is our page. No, this is our page over here. Somewhere over here. Interactive web content. This is actually chapter 10 in our book. And I thought I had a PowerPoint, but I guess I don't. So I'll just go over generally what's in the chapter, but mostly I want to show you how to put together a form. That's the gist of this. There are design considerations when you're creating forms, just like on any web page. And so as we create a form for your final project, the form's not actually going to do something. You're just designing what the form will look like for data entry. I tried to get a way to have your form actually send you an email message, but our servers are set up in such a way where the security locks that ability away from us. So we can't do that. So quickly, let me run through the chapter on this. It's already open here, so let me go to this page. Of course, today's web is interactive. I mean, that's really, if you're doing web design, chances are you're creating some type of interactive website, web page. Static web pages have their use for information that never changes, but they're not very engaging. So apps and interactivity is where it's all at nowadays. So when we learn to create web pages, we also learn to create like software user interfaces, a way to collect information from users. We trust our programmers to do some kind of manipulation of the data on the server, and then we format the data as it's sent back to the page. We won't be doing that in this course, but these are the types of things that programmers do when they're developing software. How is the interface going to work? The back and forth transport of information. Of course, HTML provides us with form tags, which are really easy to use and powerful. You'll enjoy this because you put some tags together and it puts drop-down menus and dialog boxes and radio buttons and check boxes very easily, and they look good too. You can style them all to your heart's content. You can actually style how these things look by redefining the tags themselves. We're not going to get much into that here. Easy to do, same as styling any tag. We've talked about JavaScript and PHP, client side and the server side way of dealing with user input. I may have mentioned Ajax to you, but Ajax is the technology that has pretty much revolutionized the web and brought us this thing that we call Web 2.0. It's one of the major technologies that provide what Ajax provides is the ability for the web browser to act like software. Before Ajax and its capability, you might be using, let's say you're using Google Docs, which is an Ajax-based software. You might be editing a document, and you highlight a word and click the bold button to make it bold. It would have to go to the server, reload the whole page, and show you a new page with that word in bold. And it would take 2 seconds. But instead of that, in Google Docs, you highlight something and make it bold, and it happens like that. Because some of the software is actually functioning right on your computer. It's not on the server, it's client side. Ajax allows you to do things like if you type a password that's not very strong, it could give you a little error message there. As you're typing each character, you see a bar that says strong, strong, stronger, these kinds of things, the interactivity. So all of our favorite, many of our favorite online applications are there thanks to Ajax. Ajax is not a kitchen cleanser. It is a acronym for JavaScript, asynchronous JavaScript, and XML. XML is a database language for manipulating data, and JavaScript, of course, is the most popular language for client-side programming. You might have heard of Jquery as well. Have you heard of something called Jquery? Jquery is just a library of functions that you can use for JavaScript that allows you to create interactive elements for your web page very easily. And if you know a little bit of JavaScript, it's really easy to pick up Jquery. In fact, it saves you a lot of work. If you're interested in these kinds of things, CGS 2835 is the course that we've designed to follow this one that starts getting you into creating interactive websites. Of course, as you're creating these interactive websites, you have to watch out for accessibility. Make sure that people with all different types of disabilities are able to access the page. They talk a little bit about design, and again, they stress this point that people are used to seeing certain interfaces a certain way. You don't want to go out and create a brand new style for having users log into your site, for instance. You know, it's basically an accepted way that we do these things. So you want to, again, use interfaces that people expect and know how to use. There's all different kinds of controls. We'll look at those in a second. There's ways to put attributes along with your form tags so that people can tab through them and manipulate a form totally from the keyboard. You can actually set the number of each of your form elements, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, in a sequence. So as you press the tab button, you just move from one to the next element, and you press space to select things. And so HTML form elements are kind of built in to be accessible to begin with. Okay, talk about giving help and instructions for how to use forms. Responding to errors. You know, that's one of the most frustrating things about using forms is you fill out, 20 fields in a form when you're buying something, all your address information and stuff. And then you click submit and it comes back and it says error, and you have to somehow figure out where you messed up, right? So typically they put something in red bold saying this is where it's wrong. But it would be nice that while you're typing it, a little error message could pop up right when you go to the next field and say, oops, go back and do that again. And with Ajax, we're able to start doing that now. Providing user feedback, providing error messages, explaining errors. All of these things are considerations for designing applications. And the design process is the same as for pages. And I actually like one of their figures here, because this is a great example of what you're doing in part one of your final project. You're creating a wireframe. So this is a nice example of how the wireframe differs from your design. So you're going to be asked to create a wireframe of your page, and then you're going to be asked to give us a design, template.html. And that's how they should kind of relate one to the other. The wireframe doesn't include any specific font, any specific graphics. All you do is you implement that in your design stage. All right, so that's what the author has to say about forms. I was trying to figure out the best way to approach this. I was just going to create a form, but I notice I have one already here. Yeah, let me show you a little Dreamweaver. So easy to create forms in Dreamweaver. Can you let me see this window? That's the worst part about resizing your screen while an application is running. Well, that shouldn't be a problem. It wasn't running to start with. All right, this is working now. So we'll do a new file. Let's use a nice one-column centered fixed width template. There's the code. Mostly the code that's so complicated here is there just so we have. Now let's make this real simple. This is actually in a container. We don't need to have a container. I want this very simple. Let's do a blank HTML page. Okay, so we can look at the code for this. And it's straight ahead code, right? Nothing there is unfamiliar. We can look at a split design. or we can just look at the page itself. So the first thing you have to do when you're creating a form is insert the form tag. I can do that by just choosing Insert Form. What do we see? A red box. What do we see in the code? Might be hard for you to see it because of the color of the font. But a form tag. ID form 1, name form 1, method post action, nothing. The action is where you're going to put some kind of a file that's going to act on the form data. The other thing that all forms need, I don't know if I can look at this as split. Yeah, if I close this, we can do this. There, okay. Bring this over a little bit. So we have a form. The other thing, what else does every form have? The only thing that every form has. Yeah, a submit button. Something for the user to click that sends the data they've typed to the application. All right, and it may not say, oftentimes it says submit. Other times it says, purchase, or log in. You can make the submit button say anything you want it to. So I'm going to go ahead and insert a form element, and it's going to be a button. And the type is button. The name is submit, and OK. There's my button. Now you notice the button says button. How about that? There we go. That's a little bit better. When that button is clicked, it will automatically take whatever action you stated in the form here. Okay, that's how it works. So what kind of things can we put in a form? You guys tell me something you can find in a form. Name. All right, so what kind of element is name? Anybody know what that box that holds text is called? Thank you. Yeah, I call them text boxes. They call them a text field. And you can give it an ID of anything. There's a couple different attributes that are a little bit confusing, but we can call this the first name, fname box. And it says attach a label for the attribute. I'm going to say no. There's all kinds of things you can do. I want to keep this very simple. So we have, I don't want a label. I should just be typing the code because it's a little less confusing. Okay, there's my first name box. I can go in front of it and type first name. All right, it's a text box. And, we might want last name, but we don't care about that. And next we might want to do let's say gender. It's a good radio button category. So we call this gender. We'll skip the label. That's what I did wrong before. Okay, and it's just a button. Now I want to go before this button and put. Now I can take that and I can copy it. Right click by accident. We need any more than 2 options here?
So you can actually change it on the right side too then.
Exactly. So you're doing the code and you're doing it here as well. Now, let me show you something here. Let's preview this. Let's see if it works. Now, first I have to save it. Let's call it a form. And we'll put it on my desktop. Boy, a ton of computers available to me here. This you guys? All right, now we can preview it. This is a lot like Komodo. Choose the browser you want to preview it in. Pardon me?
Can we do what you just did in Komodo?
you'd type the commands. You couldn't edit the actual, you couldn't choose from a menu, insert form. That's not available. Oh, you can't even see that. That's interesting. Oh yeah, this is just an HTML file, so you save it on your computer, you open it in Komodo.
Now I see why your remover costs so much.
Yeah, exactly. So I choose male here. What happens when I choose female? Oh, it actually worked. I didn't think it would work. So the reason it works is that the name is the same. I think it's the name. Yeah, it's the name.
But a female male is the labels and then the name.
Yes, exactly. The buttons aren't anything right now. So we would have to, let's see what happens when I call this one radio 2. Notice male and female didn't change here. I preview it now. Something's wrong. I can select them both. You see that? It didn't turn off when I select female. They both have to have the same name. The name is what's sent to the program. It's kind of what we call the variable name. So the program would say, give me radio. But we don't want to call it radio. We probably want to call it gender. And this one, so both of these options have to have the same name for it to work like a radio button. And the ID is fine. We can keep that gender. I would make it the same. But the value is going to be different because one's male and one's female. So we would want to change this. The first one's male. The second one's female. Okay, nothing's changed with the way our form looks, but now we are set up to go ahead and send this data to the application, and it will know which one of these buttons we clicked. So I can come over here and refresh the page again, and now these work as a single select item. Okay. Let's see what happens if we change this to checkbox. What happens when you start using this stuff is that you forget the code because it does everything for you. But it works vice versa. You might not know the code for something, but you create it in Firefox, and then you look at the code that that Dreamweaver created to learn what the code is and how to do it. It's a great educational tool. So the difference now, if we refresh it, is we have little boxes instead of circles, and now we're able to check them both. Okay, so for check boxes, you can check multiple items, and so that's the main difference there. Of course, we wouldn't want to use check boxes here. And in this case, I would change these names not to be gender, but this one would be male, this one would be female, because they're not the same selection at all. All right, let me switch over now, and let's look at a full form. This kind of fast forward us, it's kind of like a cooking show. Put it in the oven and then say, oh, here's one I've already prepared. All right, so this is a full guest book page. Notice, inevitably, when you're creating a form, you're going to find that, oh man, all my stuff is along the left column and there's nothing over here. So the best way to kind of put things over here, I always use tables for this. This is the one case where I use tables for page layout instead of CSS divs, because tables are pretty much columnar. I'm missing it for some reason. I'm doing this a lot today, forgetting words totally. And so you can put things in different columns with a table really easily. So these, of course, act as text boxes. Text boxes, you can specify how many letters you will accept as a first name. So if you have a first name longer than 30 characters, your first name's too long. And you can determine that. Now, the reason why you want to do that is because of that thing we called code injection attacks. These are the forms that hackers use to come in here and say some kind of command to a database to dump all of its content to the web page. They could put 150 lines of code in a text box, and when this form is submitted, it goes right to a program that then shoots that code over to the database. So you can actually send code to programs on the server here and have them do nefarious types of activities. So you want to make sure that you limit the amount of text that can go into your text boxes. And there's also, when you get into learning this, you always filter anything anybody submits through a text box to make sure it doesn't include code symbols, so you can strip all that out of there. It's people that don't do that, like Sony, that get hacked. The last hack on Sony also, the group that pulled it off, they boasted about their attack. They said that all of the passwords stored in the Sony database were unencrypted. They were just plain text passwords, which is just insane when it comes to security. So here we may like many forms of music, right? So that's perfect for checkboxes. Here's our gender. We have an undecided gender. We have political parties. You know, that's a pretty good drop-down menu. Now what you want to avoid is you want to avoid saying, what's your political party, and giving a text box and letting the person type it in. Only let people type things in that are not standard words, because somebody may not know how to spell Republican, or they may typo, or they might type when they type Democrat in there and leave out the E or something. And that will get stored in a database as maybe a fifth different type of party, you know. So if you're doing what month were you born, what's your birthday, things like that, don't let them type in August 29th. Let them choose from a menu the month and even the day number. Don't let them type in 29, because they might type 02 for 2, you know, you just don't know. Things that aren't standardized, you have to give them options. And of course, there's all kinds of code that you create to make sure that what people are submitting are legitimate types of responses. So this particular program goes ahead and spits out just a second window that shows what I typed in the form. And I'm guessing this is JavaScript. It's been a while since I wrote it. Yeah. Sorry, that's Chrome. So, looks like we're looking at, oh, the style sheet's in the beginning of this thing, okay. So yep, JavaScript. Here's the JavaScript that simply grabs everything you submitted. So if we look at this, here's the checkboxes. What kind of music do you like? The input type is checkbox. The name here is rock, because it's for the word rock. Here's the tab index. The tab index shows you the order that things are going to occur when you hit the tab. So let's look at that. So that's kind of cool. If I start in this first box and hit the tab, it takes me here, and I can type something here. It takes me here. It takes me to rock. If I want to unselect rock, I can just hit the space bar and it unselects it. So you don't have to use a mouse to navigate this form. I've decided, oh, let's go back to gender. How does it do that? Arrow keys. So you see it skips from male over to political party when I do the tab. Shift tab always takes you back. You guys know that? Shift and tab at the same time reverses your tab. So gender is treated as an entity by itself. And if you want to change your selection, just use the arrow keys. And that's all encoded with this tab index. You tell it where you want it to go in what order. All right, so that's a checkbox. Here's the radio button for gender. They all have the same name, just different values associated with them in the tab index. That drop-down name for political party, drop-down list. this is a select. All of these other things use the type input. I mean the tag input, whether it's a text box at the top. Text boxes use input, the input tag. It's just the type is text. Our check boxes use the input tab, the type is checkbox. Radio buttons use the input tag, and the type is radio. The drop-down menu, however, doesn't use the input tag. It uses the select tag. There's all different kinds of menus you can have. You can have them drop down. You can have them just post the whole thing right there as a list. In this case, we're having several options here, and they show what the option values are when you click these items. So if you choose independent, this form is going to say party equals independent. It'll send that to the software. So the names that you use for these things is really important that they make common sense. And then down here we have our button. The name is submit. The value is submit. And in this case, on click, it goes ahead and runs the JavaScript program. It's kind of the basics of forms. Now, where the resource you really use for this, did I lose it? It must be back here. Good. The resource you really use for this is W3 Schools. W3 Schools has a great section on forms, how to do text fields, password fields. So if you ever wondered when you type your password it just shows those big dots, it's because they created a text box and made it a password field. It's that simple. Input type password instead of input type text. That's how you make those dots. Radio buttons, check boxes, submit buttons, and then a whole bunch of other things here, including a send email from. So one of your extra credits is to do a contact me form. This is what you do. You just copy the code and stick it in a page and you just did it, essentially. Okay? This is the code right here. That's the form. Put a title on there, a header on there, you know, contact me, and that's it. Just set this. And this works. Hit the reset button. Let's see. Yeah, I could reset it and all goes back to the blank. So you can play around with that, use the code for your assignment. You can get more fancy with it, certainly. Okay. Forms are kind of fun. I remember my first form. Always remember your first form. It was so exciting. Well, let's see. It's 1933. Tell you about it now. You know, some things are best kept private, I think. I don't form and tell. All right, Ken.
For more information about FSU's program in interdisciplinary computing, visit www.pic.fsu.edu.